Hi, Keely Reason here, owner of Love Hope Adventure, where I blog about the marriage relationship, intimacy in marriage, and how you can go deeper with your spouse. And today I'm talking about the difference between low libido and responsive desire. So I think a lot of times people think they have a low libido. In reality, it's just the way that they respond to sex. Oftentimes, I think couples end up with a partner that is opposite their sex drive. And this is something we talk about all the time in marriage. It's like one of you wants sex more often than the other, or at different times, or whatever. That's okay. That's not even a problem. And it doesn't even mean that you have a low libido. But you can feel that way because it's like your spouse comes to ask for sex before you even thought about it, or before you were even ready. And you think to yourself, well, that must mean my libido's low. It doesn't. It could just mean that you only feel aroused about sex when something sexual is happening. So low libido is often tied to like your medications can cause you to have zero desire for sex ever, even when you start having sex. You're not desiring it. It never feels good. You never get there. I'm not talking about one time when you're exhausted from being awake with your kids all day. I'm talking about all the time. Depression can cause this. Exhaustion does cause it, okay? You're going to have less desire, less, thoughts about sex and less desire for it, like natural arousal, if you're utterly exhausted, okay? So maybe you're sick can also cause that as well. However, there is a difference between low libido and a responsive desire. Responsive desire is when you aren't feeling like having sex, you're not feeling aroused, but then your spouse comes and starts kissing on your neck, and maybe they start kissing on your mouth or whatever it is that turns you on, okay? Maybe it's even further along than that. Maybe they have to be actually directly stimulating you, or possibly you've already begun having sex before you really start feeling aroused. So that happens. It happens a lot. In fact, there's actually some studies that show that women don't always even notice their own arousal. It's more difficult for them. They don't have the same arousal sensation that a man has. A man can tell pretty much immediately, right? Because he gets an erection, but a woman may not tell that she is secreting any lubricant. Maybe she's like hormonal or just kind of dry anyway, so that's a hard thing. It can be very difficult to notice your own arousal. So it starts feeling good when sex really starts happening, right? If that's happening to you and you're not like feeling this pull or this draw or the arousal ahead of time, A, there's nothing wrong with you, and B, that does not necessarily mean you have a low libido. What it means is you probably need something sexual happening to cause that arousal. Instead of like the person who has a spontaneous desire. Now, a spontaneous desire is different, okay? That person, whether it's the husband or the wife, tends to like feel excited and aroused when nothing sexual is happening. Okay, can we just say teenage hormones here? Like this happens all the time for teenagers, right? They're not even thinking about sex. The next thing you know, they're feeling excited. What's happening? Okay, hormones is definitely like a driving factor in that. This is why a lot of women who typically have a responsive desire end up having a spontaneous desire around their like ovulation cycle, leading into, the time when their eggs are ready for fertilization, right? So there might be this spike. And I hear a lot of couples say this, oh, my first baby was because she attacked me at the door. Why? Because she had a hormone change on account of ovulation that caused her to have an increased desire that was spontaneous, even if that wasn't what she previously felt. So, instead of penalizing yourself, feeling bad about yourself, or even telling your spouse, I have a low libido and I don't feel like ever having sex or whatever, causing issues between you and your spouse, instead, really listen to your body. Think about, when do you feel excited? When do you feel aroused? Do you feel excited and aroused after you start having sex? Maybe it's a couple minutes in. Maybe it's during foreplay. Maybe it's when you light a certain candle or smell a certain fragrance, or maybe it's when you put on lingerie. Maybe you don't wear lingerie. Maybe it's when you take your clothes off, or whatever it is. Pay attention to your arousal. Figure out when it happens. And then ask your spouse about their arousal. When do you feel aroused? This will give you both a good indication about each other's desire. Is your spouse someone who spontaneously wants sex? Okay, they weren't wanting it, and 2 seconds later, now they are, and you're trying to figure out what happened. You just asked them to pass the salt, and all of a sudden they're like, hey. And you're like, hey, is that what's happening? Is that you? Is that your spouse? Are you the person that needs to actually go through the process of beginning foreplay and kissing and getting ready and start having sex, and then you're like, man, I'm really into this. I really enjoy this. If that's the case, you're probably someone who has a responsive desire. So my encouragement to you is to figure out, A, do I really have low libido? Really, because if you do, then you need to talk to your doctor. You need to find out, am I on medication? Am I just exhausted? Is my hormones completely out of whack? All right, low libido is a sign that other things are happening in your body. Or do you just have a responsive desire and you've mislabeled it and you've misunderstood it? But you've been made to think, oh, I have a low libido. So, that's what it is. It's not fixing it. Instead, you have to do things differently. You and your spouse have to come to an understanding. They may love spontaneous sex, and that's great, and that's okay for you to say yes to it, because you have to tell yourself, hey, at some point, I am going to be really into this. And if you're not, and it happens on occasion where you say yes and you really don't ever get there, that's okay too. It is not okay to have that be the only way you interact with your spouse, because then you'll start dreading sex. Instead, get ahead of the curve. Plan it yourself. If you are someone who is a responsive desire spouse, you should take the lead on initiating. At least half the time, if not more. You're going to be happier, your spouse is going to be happier, and you're going to be more enthusiastic. Why? Because you initiated it. Your spouse is going to understand that, hey, I want you to have sex with me. I'm telling you it. I'm putting it on the schedule. I'm informing you. It's okay if you inform them an hour earlier. It's okay if you get up in the morning and say, I want sex with you tonight. Even if you're not feeling like it right now, you probably won't either later in the night. The idea behind it is preparing yourself, getting yourself ready. So that's part of responsive desire. Tell your spouse, I want to have sex with you, even if there's some lead time. Get yourself mentally prepared. If you tell them in the morning, if you tell them after dinner, and give yourself a little bit of time, now you're thinking about it. You're formulating your night, your day, your schedule around, okay, we have to get to the bedroom by a certain time so we can have sex, and this is how it's going to happen. You're thinking to yourself, I want to burn this candle, or I want to put on this fragrance, or I want to do this thing, or whatever it is. Whatever it is that you need to do to get ready for sex, starts helping you, have a sexual situation. Even some visualization, visualizing, okay, what are we going to be doing? When are we going to be doing it? Where are we going to be doing it? Those things help with responsive desire. And if all else fails, if you are a person who has a responsive desire and you tell your spouse who has a spontaneous desire that you want sex, they will take the lead on the rest. Most of the time, they will. You start the conversation, tell them you want to be intimate with them, and then they'll start taking the lead and making things happen for you all. It's really important that you understand the difference between these two things. Seek help for actual low libido, and for things that is just about your desire, responsive or spontaneous, have true conversation with your spouse, figure it out, and then work a plan. If your spouse understands this about you, whether it's your spontaneous desire or your responsive desire, okay? Either way, if you understand each other's desires and how you feel aroused and when you feel aroused, and you have real discussion about it and you're open and honest, then your sex life will be better. It has no way to not be better, because now you're opening the lines of communication instead of just letting it be however it's going to be. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any questions, always feel free to email me, Keely@lovehopeadventure.com, and visit the website, lovehopeadventure.com, for more information. I'll chat with you later.